That's really intense. Gary Gensler, the former SEC chief, is now speaking in a TV interview about his bullish Bitcoin case, making very, very strong statements about Bitcoin. Some say he has now become a Bitcoin maximalist. We absolutely have to check this out. Additionally, we see here that in Oklahoma, the strategic Bitcoin reserve bill is missing and not going through. That's initially very, very negative and very, very bad. But there's a fascinating closing statement here from Senator Gary where even some politicians have changed their opinion on Bitcoin due to this statement, which we absolutely have to look at here. He says here that you can't compare Bitcoin to a company because Bitcoin doesn't have people, and therefore you can't compare Bitcoin. And that's why Bitcoin also has a much lower risk. If you held Bitcoin for at least 4 years, you were always in the positive. And very, very many massive statements that he makes here. But we actually start here with Gary Gensler, where even Donald Trump said that at the latest on the first day when he becomes the new president, he will kick Gary Gensler out. Gary Gensler then left more or less voluntarily. Pseudo-voluntarily, not really voluntarily, I believe, but he realized that he no longer had a chance here with President Donald Trump. And then he vacated the position. Now we have a new SEC chief. But there were always speculations. Is he a Bitcoin supporter or not? In my opinion, he was always a Bitcoin supporter. But many in the crypto scene viewed him rather negatively because he wasn't very open to crypto regulation and all the altcoin projects. And this is addressed quite openly. And the statements he's making now are truly astonishing.
Hey, Gary, final question for you. As you probably watched, so many CEOs were doing almost victory laps in the crypto world as these enforcement cases were dropped by this current administration of cases, of course, cases that you had brought. As you watched that, what did you think?
Look, I'm going to step back a little bit from any individual cases and just say this again to your viewing public. This is a very small part of the financial markets, but if you were interested in this, think about every financial asset sort of trades on a bit of fundamentals and sentiment. But this field is almost 99 or maybe one might say 100% sentiment and very little on fundamentals. And while something like Bitcoin may persist for a long time because there's 7 billion people around the globe, a real keen interest in it, there's 10 or 15,000 others of these tokens. And to think through your own risk, your own personal risk about where are the fundamentals. And if this is just about sentiment, then generally those don't end up well, and most then go down.
Hayes is talking here like a true Bitcoin maximalist. He makes a very clear distinction between Bitcoin and all other cryptocurrencies, or between Bitcoins, or however you want to say. He said there are fundamentals and there is sentiment. And most Bitcoins are driven by sentiment, like the Melania coin or the Trump coin, which get hyped up, everyone jumps in, and then people get rugged hard. Again. But with Bitcoin, we actually have real fundamentals. And he even says potentially there are 7 billion people who could have an interest in Bitcoin. And Bitcoin truly has real fundamentals. I mean, by that he means things like there being an absolute limit, that it's decentralized, and so on. And all of that is just not present with the other Bitcoins, and so on, not. And that's why he makes a very, very clear distinction. And he is also addressed on this because now all the cases are being rolled back, as he was always very, very strict. He simply distinguished, okay, Bitcoin is clearly a commodity, everything else is a security, and so on. And yes, accordingly, it's very, very interesting that the regulation is now being partially lifted. And now everyone can do their shitcoin business again. He didn't directly say that he finds it bad, but you can kind of hear it, that he's not really a big fan of it.
Are you talking, you're contrasting Bitcoin with the other ones, or they're all the same?
Joe, I'm glad that you spoke up because I know you're a bit of a Bitcoin enthusiast and think less well of the rest of those. It's how you and I have always connected in the green rooms. But think of these 10 or 15,000 other tokens, and just on the economics, just on the fundamentals, what are the fundamentals?
No, I know, but that was my question. You throw Bitcoin in with the rest of them, or do you think Bitcoin is different is qualitatively different than the others?
I think there's the distinction is similar to in metals. There's only 2 or 3 precious metals. We humans have a certain fascination with 2 or 3 precious metals like gold. I don't think we humans will have a fascination with 10 or 15,000 meme or sentiment tokens trading over the years.
Dismissal even clearer. He says here there are somehow 15,000 ICOs, meme coins, and so on, and there is somehow Bitcoin and maybe one or two other tokens that might be interesting. He makes the comparison that there are also metals, precious metals, or something like that, which are somehow used as a store of value. You also don't use 500 different metals to store your value, but it eventually became established that gold and silver are the best. And it's the same here in the crypto space. It will turn out that Bitcoin is the best. Maybe there are one or two others that are interesting, one or two other tokens or so, but definitely not 5,000 tokens. And accordingly, he makes a very, very bullish statement here for Bitcoin and says again, hey.
Gary, I wanted to actually ask you something different, which is you're teaching AI now. And one of the things that seems to be happening in the marketplace is there's a lot of trading taking place as a function of AI, meaning literally AI programs are operating on the exchange. Do you look and think to yourself that a year or 2 years from now, I don't know what, that people, that literally human beings are not going to be making real decisions and that AI is going to be able to be a better investor than us?
I think artificial intelligence is the most transformative technology of our times, and it's changing so much of finance, investment management, underwriting, and trading, as you say. And I think over the next 5, 12 years, it will change and transform, as you say, a lot. Humans will still have a role, but as we put more of this in the algorithm, it will shift.
Simply about, for example, what influence AI has on all the trading stuff and the entire financial markets and so on. And he says it will indeed have a massive impact in the coming years. He also touches on this later in the interview. AI naturally analyzes all the speeches by Jerome Powell, what Donald Trump says, and so on. And then, of course, it might be able to make better decisions than a human. But he says that this will only be the case in about 5 to 6 years, because AIs are still too slow in some areas. But in any case, this was a very, very exciting insight from Gary Gensler, who is clearly very, very bullish on Bitcoin in a maximalist way. Now let's take a look at the massive speech from Oklahoma regarding the Bitcoin bill, which unfortunately didn't pass. But this was the bullish statement, the closing statement, and as mentioned, the statement even led to some politicians switching to pro-Bitcoin just before the vote. And massive statements were made here.
No debate. Senator Guthrie, would you care to close the debate? Senator Guthrie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know Bitcoin is hard to grasp. This is not something new. If you look at Bitcoin over the last 10 years, like I said, it has a 12,000% increase and 49% annualized return. There has not been a period of 4 years that Bitcoin has lost money. Bitcoin is not going away.
So that's already a very, very strong opening. I would like to first take the stance that it's sometimes not so easy to understand Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is nothing new, and Bitcoin is something that simply has a good track record. We have here the best performing asset of all time, or definitely of the last 15 years. It creates incredible memories. If you hold your Bitcoin for at least 4 years, you are always in the plus. I think that's not entirely true. I believe it's about 4 years and almost half a year, 4 years, for months or something like that. And he also clearly states, Bitcoin will not disappear again. We have to deal with Bitcoin now. You can already see it in the body language here, that she is very, very convinced of the whole Bitcoin thesis. And that's also what many people somehow always understand. At the beginning, they are very, very uncertain. And over time, they become extremely confident because they simply understand, hey, this is now the new stage of financial evolution.
And I also want to say thank you very much, Senator Hall, for taking the time and going through this and discussing this with me. That I really do have a lot of respect for you for that. Oklahoma can be last, or we can be at the front of the line. And there's a lot of things we're last in. And this is going to come around at some point where if we don't do this today, we're going to do this at some point. This bill puts guardrails in place.
The big realization that every country, every company, every individual must grasp here. Either you do it voluntarily now and be part of the first movers, or you will have to do it eventually out of necessity, but then you won't be part of the first movers anymore and will miss out on.
It limits to 5%. It says we're only investing in something that has a market cap of $500 billion. That is not a small investment. This does not have people's hands in it. This is not a company that can fail. Bitcoin is too big to fail. It is already in place. It is an asset. It will not fail. It cannot go away.
Is too big to fail. Already capable. It is an asset. It will not. Can't go away. Neither Donald Trump nor Friedrich Merz can meddle with it in any way. That's why Bitcoin will also outlast central banks, politicians, and everything here.
So if you look at companies, and Senator, you mentioned .com were run by people. People are flawed. People make bad decisions, and they can fail. And what we saw with the .com, that is exactly what happened. This is not that case. Like I said, we can be first, get in first of the line, be proactive, and do something where we are having a fiduciary duty to also make good investments with our constituents' investments and money. And this is up to 5%. This is not say we have to do 5%. This says we can do 0.5%. The foreign bonds are 0.6%. That is not, I don't believe that is a good investment. This is something we could replace that with. But we could leave this in the hands of the treasurer. They're statewide elected official. They are in the position to make those good sound investments, as well as the pension board. They will vet these before they make any kind of decision such as this. So I would respectfully ask for your support and put Oklahoma on the map as moving forward. And I'll close with that, Mr. Chair. Respectfully ask for their support.
And put Oklahoma on the map. And I conclude with this topic. There are no central banks that could mess something up or anything like that. And he also says here, hey, Oklahoma, or not just Oklahoma, every state has to do this, every country, every company, every individual simply has to invest their money properly here. And he says just holding bonds and such is no longer the norm here. And you don't have to go all in. That would be a maximum of 5% here. You don't even have to go 5%. And that's also what I always tell you. You can consider whether 1%, 0.5%, 0.1%, 10%, 100%, 120%. But 0% is definitely the wrong allocation here. That's also what he points out here. In any case, I found this to be a very, very bullish statement. You can also see here, there are indeed politicians who do their homework, who really understand what they're talking about. Yes, write me in the comments what you think about it, also about Gary Gensler's statements. If you still want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link below to Trend 1 Bitcoin, showing you how to buy Bitcoin easily, safely, and simply. With the code Bitcoin, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. I'm going into the sea now for a swim. Peace out.